Five Nights at Freddy's, a horror staple, one that to my knowledge spawned the mascot horror craze, and one that is chock full of colorful animatronics. Unfortunately, it is also a franchise that I've never interacted with outside of a few YouTube videos, and while I'm aware of its cultural impact and the characters, of course, I've never actually played any of the games. At least not until this stream. But one of you lovely viewers suggested pairing up Twisted Wonderland's cast with animatronics from FNAF, and I figured, why not? It's spooky season after all, and this beloved franchise has a lot of distinct characters, some of which immediately jumped out at me wearing twist-shaped masks. So I'm willing to dive into the ball pit of my very, very limited knowledge to create some connections for your entertainment. As always, we'll be discussing EN server story content for Twist and some of the FNAF characters, games, and lore, so consider this your spoiler warning for both. On another spoilery note, I will not be comparing anyone to Springtrap or the various iterations of Afton that are known to me, because I genuinely do not believe anyone in the Twisted Wonderland cast is that inherently evil. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's start our journey with the individual most likely to visit a pizza place, the gluttonous Grim. I think Grim's FNAF equivalent, or at least the animatronic he vibes with most, is Gregory. Now, there is a grand philosophical question being asked in this comparison, the question of, is Gregory an animatronic? To be completely honest, I don't know. The last I heard, there was still debate as to whether Gregory was or was not an animatronic, given some of the contextual story bits in Security Breach, and I honestly don't think that it matters in the case of Grim, because the other parts of these two characters are all too similar to me, and I honestly just felt like Grim and Gregory would vibe. Our beloved little fuzzball is an annoying, whiny child that is also main character adjacent. And both of these kiddos would absolutely sneak into a pizzaplex for their own benefit, whatever that benefit may be. I can totally see Grim sneaking in to eat all of the pizza and other snacks with his infinite stomach, effectively putting the location out of business. I also think Grim would be terrified of the other animatronics and by extension might also burn the place to the ground as he tries to defend himself, which is similar to one of the endings of this game if I'm recalling correctly. So, as far as I'm concerned, even if Gregory is a normal child and not an animatronic, he is still part of the FNAF canon, and I associate him with Grim more so than any of the actual animatronics, so that's who I'm going to pair Grim up with here. Moving into Heartstable, we're going to start with the House Warden, Riddle, who is unfortunately forever correlated to Music Man in my mind, specifically DJ Music Man, because Cater's subconscious made Riddle into a DJ in his dream, and it makes me chuckle every time I think about it, and I cannot get the two separated in my head. That is it. That is the connection. If you wanted something deeper, then maybe there is some sort of connection between Riddle getting angry over little things and Music Man getting mad about his groove being thrown off. Like, you can't throw off the Teapot Tyrant's groove, guys. Come on. That's just asking for your head to be taken off. I'm sure there's likely a better animatronic out there for Riddle's actual character, but I just cannot stop smiling at this wacky combo, so that's what I'm going to leave him with here. Trey is also getting a character that I genuinely think just is funny to equate him to, and that's Candy Cadet, the robot that gives you candy, and sometimes extremely deep lore that would have been great to know up front, like the fact that Riddle's mom yelled at Trey and his parents for like 4 hours straight. You know, things like that. Both of these guys also function as their resident games suite producers, with Candy Cadet giving out candy, and Trey baking all sorts of fun treats for Heartstable. And they both function as lore givers within their respective plots. I also think the two of them can be easily overlooked as well, since they just kind of exist. They aren't the most colorful or fun characters, but they do have a depth, and they do have purpose. And I think they're way more conceptually connected than perhaps Riddle and Music Man, so they've got that going for them as well. Now then for Cater, I'm going entirely on vibes, and those vibes are pointing to Glam Rock Freddy. Cater is extroverted and socially aware, and I think Glam Rock Freddy, through virtue of being the band's frontman, has similar qualities. He's the only animatronic in Security Breach to remain aware, so to speak, and he's generically energetic and kind. Cater is extroverted and a bit of a glam rocker too, and on the whole, I think he's got similar instincts. Cater is able to immediately understand the danger of his dream and protect the dream team, similar to Freddy protecting Gregory. But this isn't the only time that Cater does this. In Playful Land, he pulls a similar stunt, so I think this hidden protective nature is strong within him, even if he normally covers his care with sus expressions and bubbly photo taking. Aesthetically, I think these two share similarities, and both being musically gifted in their own ways also strengthens this connection. So I'm happy to leave them together here. Who knows, maybe they'll start a trend or compose the next biggest hit. Anything's possible. Deuce is, of course, Bonnie, because both of these guys are rabbits, and both of these guys can be deadly when they want to be. Deuce, for his part, has his delinquent ways backing him, and while he doesn't want to tread down that path anymore, there are times where he slips up and the delinquent comes back out. I personally feel that Bonnie is the least creepy of the OGs, but once he starts giving you that side eye and coming down the hallway, you're gonna feel his ire. Both of them have this kind of cute exterior that can be quickly dissolved once they're irritated. However, they eventually go back to being good little kiddos, and I love that for them. Plus, the rabbit tie-ins and the color palettes being similar also just melded the two together in my mind. So, Deuce and Bonnie, Bonnie and Deuce, the two of them are going to leave here. Ace, though, in my mind, is Foxy, not just because they're both gingers, but because both of them are a little bit more aware of their surroundings than they let on, even if they don't always act on that awareness. Ace, for most of Twisted Wonderland, is stuck in a pattern of behavior due to his own fear, which caused me a lot of frustration because he had such potential, but he would never use it or act upon it. Foxy is off in his own stage with a lot of potential as a side act or even as a main act on his own, but his dysfunction limits his activities, and his own fear of being confined is part of the reason that he lashes out at the player. But even Foxy's attack is very defined, very loop-like, since he attacks the same way every single time. Ace consistently avoids responsibility in a similar way despite knowing he has talents and smarts. So I feel like while these two have separate issues, the way they handle them is somewhat similar. Plus, Ace is about as fast as Foxy when he's zooming to give Riddle what for in Riddle's dream, so there's that too. I think Foxy is a very fun character, and there's a bit of showmanship in his pirate shtick that can be connected to Ace's own magical stunts. These reasons may not be watertight, but I do think there is a certain charm to both characters, one that has connected them in my brain. Next up is Savannah Claw with their housewarden Leona, who I think is very similar to Funtime Freddy, for one simple reason. Leona seems like the kind of guy that's got a little voice in the back of his head. We see throughout Leona's story in Book 2 and beyond that he has some self-doubts, so to speak. And he kind of has a mantra that he follows even though he doesn't fully believe it, that is influenced by other people telling him certain things. Funtime Freddy requires his little Bonnie puppet to stay sane. So even though this is somewhat reversed from Leona's position, I think the fact that the way that you defeat this animatronic is by playing those voice lines and getting them to calm down by speaking little voices in their heads, telling them what to do, is very similar to Leona's plight with his own self-confidence issues. Outside of that, though, I don't really know what else connects these two, because I think Funtime Freddy's a little bit more aggressive generically than Leona is, but I do think the voices in their head type of thing makes sense for the two of them, and I do think that they're both a little arrogant in how they present themselves. So as far as I'm concerned, the two are rather similar. Next up is Ruggie, who is twinning with Chica because both of them will eat just about anything, although unlike Chica, Ruggie has standards. One of the big themes with Ruggie is food and food scarcity, as these two things come up quite a bit with the hyena. He's got that one vignette where he teaches Jade how to make all sorts of stuff from mountain herbs. That main story piece in Book 5 where Rook reveals Ruggie's dandelion foraging habits. Book 4 when he's taking all that nearly expired food home to share with his community. The endless food in his dream in Book 7. And most importantly for our consideration today, his love of donuts. Chica loves just about any sort of food, but she especially likes pizza. However, Chica is also known for her cupcake buddies, who have a variety of roles and forms throughout the game series. Cupcakes are a handheld sweet, like donuts, and since Chica is also so heavily tied to food, there is no one else besides Ruggie on the Twist cast that could have come close to vibing with her. Calories schmalories applies to both of these characters, and while food is not all there is to Ruggie or Chica, it is still a very strong theme in both of their storytelling, so I think it's a strong enough tie here. Lastly, in Savannah Claw is Jack, who is a very basic tsundere, so I think I'm just going to give him the face of the franchise from the OG Five Nights, Mr. Freddy Fazbear. To me, Freddy is just the face of the franchise. He just kind of exists in my mind, and I'm sure he's scary, and he's got his moments, and he's just basic though. Especially at this point in the game with so many other Freddy iterations, the OG just seems to fall a little flat, and I think Jack's characterization suffers a similar fate. Jack is the quintessential jock who fits in and at NRC because he's a tsundere. This gives him enough of a villainous edge to justify his existence at the school, but Book 2 does him and the other Savannah Claw characters dirty, and since Jack acts as the catalyst for us foiling Leona, he kind of only functions as that foil in that book. In Book 3, he's there to remind us how dumb everyone else is by acting as exposition opportunities for other characters, and as reminders for important things, like the contract. And I think it's just unfortunate that Jack gets left behind by the writing so often. Freddy, to me, an uncultured observer, feels very similar. He's there because he has to be, but after the first game, I don't think he's got too much plot significance until Security Breach. I really don't know what role Freddy specifically plays in any of the other games, and I don't even think he's featured in one of them. I think one of them is just surrounding Afton. So I don't know. Freddy to me just feels so basic. He feels like he has to be there because he's the frontman of the band, but not because he actually plays a significant role. So I'm gonna place him and Jack together here since they're both a little underrated and both a little basic. Octagonal, though, is up next, which means so too is Azul, and I think, perhaps surprisingly, is very similar to Circus Baby, the animatronic that speaks to the player throughout Sister Location. In this game, Circus Baby is a beacon of hope for the player throughout the majority of the experience, slowly gaining your trust over time by helping you survive. However, in the end, you reap what she has sown, getting scooped so that she and the others can take on your form. Azul doesn't scoop his victims in the traditional sense, but he does take their talents as collateral, essentially scooping out parts of them to use for his own goals. Before you see his evil side, he does seem truly and wholly benevolent, lending you a hand in your time of need, making a deal with you that works in your favor, provided you can actually pay the price, and his charisma helps him with this deception. He's also very spiteful, and spite is what drives him to take all of his actions, including those off-screen, which transformed him into the character we got to meet. And to my knowledge, Circus Baby is also powered almost entirely by spite, feeling slighted by being a soul stuck in an animatronic body, which is kind of valid, all things considered. These two, tied together by spite and scoops both, are a force to be reckoned with for sure. Jade, on the other hand, is a very interesting guy that isn't necessarily two-faced, but he does have a hidden dark side, just like the daycare attendant. On the surface, much like Azul, Jade seems like the perfect gentleman. He's calm, collected, and very polite. offering poor unfortunate souls a shoulder to cry on that seems soft and caring. The daycare attendant is very happy-go-lucky and charming when the lights are on, insisting you play games with them while you wait for your parents to come get you. But if you're a bit naughty and turn off the lights, or perhaps cross the octa-trio, the more sadistic side of the animatronic and Jade both come out to play. Moon will try to crush your bones, and Jade will try to crush your soul. However, both aren't exactly hiding the sadism from you. Where there is Sun, there is also Moon. Where there is polite Jade, there is also sadistic Jade. And no matter how subtle the signs were, they were always there. To Sun's credit, he tries really hard to keep you from turning off those lights, which is more an explicit warning, but the point still remains. Regardless of who you are warned by and how explicit the warning, if you do not heed them, you'll likely end up dealing with the dark tendencies of either or both of these guys, and neither case is going to end well for you. Floyd is a funny little fellow whose mood flips on a dime, and I really wasn't sure if there was an animatronic that fit such unpredictability, so rather than tie him to something super threatening, I instead decided his equivalent would be Lolbit, because why not? From what I know, during custom night, Lolbit just kind of appears, causes chaos, and then leaves when they presumably get bored. And to me, this is such a Floyd thing. We have countless examples of Floyd doing things just because he wanted to and not doing things because he's not in the mood. And I think the trigger for Lolbit's interaction is kind of similar. If Floyd wants to tease Riddle, he's going to. If he wants to dance instead of drum, he's going to. If he wants to thrash those puppets, you bet your bottom dollar, he is going to. If Lolbit wants to cause some chaos, they're going to, and then they're gonna go on their merry way only to maybe be seen again. Now, I'm sure the code in the FNAF games is not quite as random as I'm describing, but I think y'all get the point, and perhaps might even understand my reasoning here. Now, I think we can all agree that Scarabia's housewarden, Kalim, is absolutely helpy, because neither of them really help with much of anything, but they're both little balls of sunshine while they're doing their best. Truthfully, I picked this animatronic for Kalim because it's the only non-aggressive one, or it's one of the only non-aggressive ones to my knowledge, and Kalim tries to resolve everything as peacefully as possible with perhaps a party. They have a very similar vibe, both are quite happy-go-lucky seeming, and at the end of the day, they do have some sort of influence. Kalim is next in line in his family and therefore is not only going to be taking over the family business, but control of an entire region of his home country. Helpy helps the player with various tasks, but over time evolved, I think. I'm not really sure about the timeline. But regardless, he becomes part of the security system's AI in Ruin, and I think that also is kind of like ruling over the Pizzaplex, in a way, since he has access to all the systems. So there's that. Both of them just bring me joy, so I had to put them together here. Jamil is a little less sparkles and sunshine and a little more manipulation, which in turn makes his FNAF equivalent the Mimic. This animatronic is exactly what it sounds like, a mimic, and it can replicate all sorts of voices to lure unsuspecting victims to their doom. From what I understand, this is also a creature that wants so desperately to get out to be in the world, and I think this desire can also parallel with Jamil's own desire to step outside of Kalim's shadow. The entirety of Book 4 is comprised of Jamil trying to prove his own worth by undermining Kalim's, using his special magic to manipulate others to accomplish this goal. I feel like Jamil and the Mimic would actually get along very well if they were able to somehow bond over their traumas. And if that were to happen, the world would be in mortal peril, because the two of these guys together could completely and would topple governments. They'd just be so powerful. Thank goodness this crossover is only hypothetical. But with that terrifying possibility in the rearview mirror, we're going to be moving into Pomfiore, and we're starting with their housewarden, Vil, who is so clearly and obviously being tied to Roxanne, Wolf, or Roxy. On the surface level, purple is a huge color for both of these individuals, and both of them are obsessed with beauty just in their own ways. Unfortunately for Roxanne, this obsession is more or less her singular personality trait within Security Breach. at least again from what I can remember, as she fusses over her appearance constantly and then goes a bit bananas when her eyes are taken from her. Vil is obsessed with beauty too and is motivated by it, but I don't think it's the whole of his character in the same way. He's more concerned with the effort it takes to become perfect, and if something was wrong, like his eye being ripped out by a child, he'd likely find a way to fix or overcome it. Still, the parallel between the two exists. Roxanne even cries and laments about her lost perfection in a similar way to Vil's cries of sorrow after he ages from being too close to the gate of the underworld in Book 6, so they have that going for them as well. Rook now is the patron of the arts, the saint of observation, and presumably a talented ballerina. Therefore, I think his FNAF equivalent would be Ballora. From what I understand, the sister location animatronics on the whole were meant to hunt children, or at least gather them from the events that they were leased to, which can tie to Rook's huntsman nature even if it is a little bit of a grim connection. Rook is not kidnapping anyone, nor is he after children, but he does like to hunt, to the point where his special magic developed specifically to pinpoint any individual Rook can envision no matter where they are in the world, which I think is also rather creepy. Since he's also a talented dancer with training in ballet, Ballora stood out amongst the bunch as the perfect representation. Heck, even her little mini-game where she hunts you based off the sounds of your movements in sister location feels like a very Rook thing to do, so I'm quite comfortable pairing these two up here. Epel, on the other hand, could care less about spending all day in a bush watching the film club go about their business. He'd much rather be out there tearing it up on the spell dry field or scuffling with those twice his size, and honestly, respect. But also Monty Gator. This animatronic is aggressive, and at the start of Security Breach, he can't even be seen, only heard. And what you hear is him going on a rampage in his room. Bro is looking for a fight and may have, allegedly, ended his predecessor in order to secure his spot in the band, which is a bit metal, but also kinda what Epel tried to immediately do upon enrollment with Vil. Like, bro straight up thought he needed to establish dominance immediately. And unlike Monty's alleged actions, Epel got his butt handed back to him and is in a bit of a pickle because of it. However, Epel did still pick a fight with his elders, so I think the point stands. And the two of them, Monty and Epel both, are bold, brash, and unafraid to tear it up, with both of them also being country boys as the cherry on top. Moving into Ignahide now, we're going to be starting with the House Warden Idia, who's a bit of a special bean. He's very much lost in the sauce of his coding most of the time, so I'm connecting him not to an animatronic specifically, but to Old Man Consequence, a very wise and very hidden character who appears when you, the player, also get lost in the sauce of FNAF World's code. The only other thing I know about this fisherman is that he has an understanding of sorts about the world outside of his game in a way. In Ultimate Custom Night, he's got a line or two about releasing grudges or leaving Afton to his demons, which suggests a level of understanding of the environment of the game, but also kind of outside it in a way. I don't know enough about the lore to know if these lines are directed at the player or at the other characters in Custom Night, but I like to think it's a fourth wall break, which is something that Idia is also known for. Idia is also connected directly to the underworld and to the consequences of that connection, and he does grapple with a little bit of a grudge over his destiny and past, so I think that also can tie to the old man and his purpose. Idia is also touted as being really good at games, so I also thought relating him to the Scott final boss would be really funny. But there is a level of depth in the fisherman that I think just suits Idia more than haha BBG kind of thing. So I'm gonna still keep him with Old Man Consequence instead for this consideration. Ortho, on the other hand, is multifaceted since he's got all sorts of gadgets, gizmos, and gears at his disposal. Therefore, I think it's only fair to relate him to all three of the Princess Quest arcade cabinets instead of multiple animatronics. Ortho is kinda already an animatronic, so relating him to some other form of technology just felt right to me. The larger reason that I wanted to connect these specific games to Ortho is the fact that completing the Princess Quest games unlocks a specific Security Breach ending, an ending where Vanny is released from the AI influence and comes back into her own sentience. Ortho's journey is about him gaining sentience, ascending from his AI label and becoming a true intelligence, even if he's still in a mechanical body. I think these themes provide a strong enough connection between the two, though I suppose it's more accurate to say that I relate Ortho in his journey to the ending of the Princess Quest rather than the cabinets themselves. But you can't reach that ending without the machinery, just like Ortho would have never become sentient if Idia didn't create him in the first place, so it works out. Now for Diasomnia, starting with their house warden Malleus, I've got one simple question for you. Or rather, a demand. Take a map. Mapbot and Malleus have an immaculate synergy in my mind because pre-book 7, they're one and the same. Malleus is the most elusive creature on campus, and to me, Mapbot is the most elusive animatronic in any of the games. Not Golden Freddy, not XOR, not any of the other Easter eggs that have low percentage chances to spawn. None of them can compare to Map. Part of this is because I simply do not understand the logistics of this particular bot, but they always appear suddenly, without warning, as if they teleported somewhere, and then they kind of disappear. I could be just remembering wrong, but I don't think we see Mapbot outside of the interactions where they give you a map, making them cryptid-like, and Malleus is similar in that regard. He pops up every once in a while in the main story, but he's kind of just there to offer hints, or help us map out our actions, so to speak. Like in Book 3 when he tells us every form of magic has a weakness. Malleus is helpful, but elusive. Kind, yet generally regarded as terrifying by his peers. And if that is not also what a mapbot is, I clearly do not know enough about FNAF. Lilia now is absolutely the puppet though, because both of them are protectors of children. The puppet gave its mechanical life trying to protect that little girl and eventually absorbed her soul. As it functions in-game, it's still trying to protect children and is on a mission to take out anyone who would harm them. Lilia, similarly, was on a mission to save Malleus by finding a way to hatch him and was so focused on this goal that it helped him develop his special magic. Even after Malleus hatched, Lilia is protecting another kiddo in his own way, in the form of blessing Silver with the Nocturnal Fae blessing to hide his hair color and then obviously adopting him. He obfuscated Silver's past to save him from the associated pain, and in-game he acts as a father figure protecting Diasomnia. These two characters aren't the same, but the protection aspects of them kind of are, and even their focus is on children and protecting those children. They also have a very similar aesthetic to me, since both are a bit short and both pop out of the ether to spook you, so there is that too. Moving on to Silver, I feel that he's very much a Mr. Hippo kind of guy. These two are just so wholesome and non-threatening, I would trust both of them with my life. Who else could put you to sleep with his long, never-ending spiel about who knows what? Certainly not Crowley. Could never be Crowley. But hey, you know who also sleeps all of the time? Silver. You know who tries to untangle people's motivations and understand their stories sometimes? Silver. You know who, to my knowledge, makes up similar stories for their entertainment of others? Mr. Hippo. Case closed. Part of the reason the Hippo is here because I kinda already gave the sleep-based animatronics to other folks on this list, so I was at a loss for what to do for Silver, until I remembered that Mr. Hippo can essentially put folks to sleep. So through that association, Mr. Hippo is also a sleepy time animatronic, and I think that's a perfect fit for our super sleepy boy. Last but not least is Sebek, little Becky, who for the first 2 years of my Twist career was the most annoying character I had the displeasure of encountering, and in honor of this terrible legacy, I've decided that his perfect FNAF counterpart is Balloon Boy. This little guy, from what I've heard, is the incarnation of annoying. Balloon Boy really doesn't do much in the title he was released in, however he's ridiculously loud, and once he starts, you can't get him to stop. Sebek is also very loud, and if you let him ramble about Malleus, you're never going to be able to escape. So I think the connection here is pretty solid. Up until Book 7, Sebek doesn't really play a role in the main story, so the only info that you get about him is through vignettes. But without knowing much about his backstory, he just comes off as this elitist a-hole who cares not for any criticism if it doesn't come from his god and his angel, and it's infuriating. Similarly, I've heard that Balloon Boy is a run killer because of his annoying laughter and constant presence that inhibits you from being able to foil the rest of the animatronics, at least in the initial title. And that's just such a Sebek thing to do. Gotta scream them into submission, right? But that's the end of the NRC students, which means it is the end of this consideration. As always, I'd like to know your thoughts on my picks in the comments down below. And if you have other animatronics you think would have been better suited to the cast, let me know those too. I, again, do not know very much about FNAF, so I'm sure there are lore inaccuracies riddling this video that would make any theorist worth their salt burst into flames. However, I'd much appreciate you transmuting that energy into the comment section. Write me a whole essay on how terribly wrong I am about Freddy or Jack. Do it. Feed me your engagement. I dare you. Or, if comments aren't your thing, you can like and subscribe instead. But as always, before you go, I just have to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.